Hello and welcome to the EPRI Current. I'm your host, Samantha Gilman, and today we're talking about a potentially unexpected topic for the EPRI Current, and that's bats. One of my favorite things to talk about at EPRI, and that was completely unexpected when I joined the organization. And so I'm joined by two bat experts. First, Christian Newman. He's the program manager for our endangered species program. And Winifred Frick. She is the chief scientist at Bat Conservation International. Thanks to both of you for joining me today. And before we get into why we're talking about bats, I want to give each of you an opportunity to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do and how you ended up here. So, Christian, why don't you go first?
Thanks, Samantha. I've been at EPRI since 2017. I'm a wildlife biologist, but probably spent the last 20 years working on different sort of bat-related issues for the energy sector. And as I've sort of come in and working on EPRI, everyone calls me the Batman. I actually like to refer myself as Commissioner Gordon because I'm more like a coordinator. But the real bat people are folks like Winifred Frick.
Great. Winifred, why don't you introduce yourself?
Excellent. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. It's always fun to get to collaborate with EPRI. And I met Christian a number of years ago. And he's being too modest. He really is a Batman because he really knows how to make things happen and work to help protect bats in various ways. So I'm the chief scientist at Bat Conservation International. I've been now with BCI for close to 10 years, and we're a nonprofit group that's focused on ending bat extinctions worldwide and collaborating with all sorts of partners around the world to ensure that we have practical and lasting, enduring protections for bats. Because bats do so much for us, but they also need our help. We need to help them. So, in the spirit of this being a fun podcast, Christian and I know each other pretty well, and most people who know me well call me Fred. So if you hear him referring to me as Fred, that's my nickname.
Excellent. So first off, I want to talk a little bit about why we talk about bats when we're talking about the electric sector. And once we get that, I want to talk about this white nose syndrome and the fat bats. So, Christian, Winifred, why do we talk about bats in the electric sector?
Well, bats interact with the energy sector in many, many ways. And so, unfortunately, and we'll get into more discussion about this, but bat populations, particularly in North America, and this is actually a worldwide challenge, are declining for different reasons. And so in North America and in the United States, as they decline, then they become at risk, and then, Fish and Wildlife Service and other state agencies become to regulate them. And so then, all the interactions in terms of sort of building and maintaining and operating different energy sectors potentially, come in conflict or bats potentially interact with them. And so, starting in 2006, a group of bat species have really started to decline. And therefore, anytime companies in the Northeast and Midwest and now, throughout the United States are trying to clear vegetation, there might be sort of bat species there. And so they have to try to comply with that. And then in addition, as we've built out sort of wind and some of these other renewable sources, unfortunately, there are, bat fatalities at wind farms. And again, wind companies in the energy sector have to comply with different, state and local laws. So, so it's become just a growing sort of issue as bat populations are more and more at risk. And then the other thing also is that, again, these bat populations, they provide a lot of benefits for society in terms of insect control and other pollinating services, depending on where you are in the world or in the U.S. And so, again, as the part of the stewardship of energy companies, they want to make sure that they're acting in a way that provides broader sort of benefits and doesn't sort of hurt, broader societal and conservation issues.
And I'll note for those of you who keep along with our social media, I'm sure you've seen our pollinator power party, which bats are a part of. And we collaborate with BCI many years of this party because the lesser long
nosed bat, yes,
pollinates agave for tequila. So they have an important function as well. But Winifred, I think I was cutting you off there. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, no worries. Always happy to support a plug for bats and tequila. So I think one thing that surprises a lot of people is just how many bat species there are. We are celebrating this week that there are now 1,500 different recognized species. That number grows every year. We're still making scientific discoveries around the world of recognizing different bat species. So bats live in all sorts of habitats. And here in North America, we have about 47 different bat species. And a lot of them live in caves, but they also live in trees. And they're also flying across the landscape in ways that put them at risk for things like wind turbines, as Christian mentioned. So we shared these landscapes with bats. And so anyone who's managing land in ways, and so like right of ways and different kind of ways that we have to manage vegetation can have either negative or positive benefits for bats. So there's lots of opportunity for creative conservation and collaboration for being able to improve and manage our habitats in ways that can benefit bats. And then that benefits us because, as Christian mentioned, bats are providing incredible services back to society. It's been estimated in the US that bats can provide billions of dollars to the agricultural sector in terms of the number of insects that they eat that increase crop yields. So bat foraging reduces insect crop damage. It also reduces the amount of pesticides that we have to put on our crops. So they're doing us a big service. In addition, some bats in Mexico pollinate the agave. So we always say, like, if you like tequila, you should toast a bat.
Yes, and the bats in my backyard do quite a service because there are a lot of mosquitoes out there, but there are also a lot of bats. And so I very much appreciate their help with that. Exactly. So one of the projects that we wanted to talk about today is the mitigation efforts against white nose syndrome, and then our creation of fat bats. Mm-hmm. Christian, Winifred, can you give us more insight into both of those?
So just for background, but for people who might not have heard of white nose syndrome, this is a disease that's caused by a fungus that was introduced into the northeastern part of the U.S., into upstate New York, around 2006, 2007. And the fungus basically infects the skin tissues of bats while they're hibernating. So bats are super cool. They're mammals like we are, but in the winter, to save energy, because there's not a lot of insects around, they actually literally chill out in terms of they just turn their metabolisms off and go cold so that they can save energy throughout the winter. And so while they're inactive and in torpor, doing this long hibernation through cold winters, this fungus that likes to be in cold, damp places can get on their skin tissues and start to eat into their skin tissues. And that causes the bats to arouse too frequently, to wake up from that torpid state, but there's nothing to eat in the winter. So they burn up their fat reserves that are really important to them for being able to make it through the winter. And they then starve to death. And we've seen greater than 90% declines in a number of different species. And we're coming up on the 20-year mark of how long we've been fighting against this disease. And the devastation has been real. We've lost millions of bats to this disease, but our hope and optimism and our dedication to trying to find solutions to help bats is unwavering. So for that, I will turn over to Christian to introduce how we started working on this together.
Yeah. So as a part of our research program, I think it was like 2018, 2019. Bat as a topic became a big issue for our funders. And so, one of the things that we wanted to sort of better understand was, what were some of the drivers of bats potentially declining, becoming regulated. And so we had Winifred come and do a presentation to our members just about white nose syndrome and trying to sort of level set, our understanding. And after the call, I followed up with Fred, and I was like, all right, well, what is some of the research that is sort of not being done? Because again, and Fred can maybe sort of talk about all the work that has occurred, but what were some of the things that haven't been done, and what niche or role could EPRI sort of play in trying to get some of those things going? And Fred, she goes, well, there's been some research showing that that bats that are that have more fat stores on them before they go into hibernation have a better chance of making it over winter. And we've had this idea of trying to potentially trying to help bats sort of put on energy before they go into hibernation. And I was like, let's do it. Give me a proposal. Let's go. And so that's kind of how we got started. And then, Fred, maybe you can describe why we call it fat bats, but that's kind of how it got started. And, from there, we started working on a number of things together.
Yep. No, it's great. Yeah, I still actually can remember where I was when we were talking on the phone and you were like, yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it. I was like, yes. Sometimes those out of the box, back of the napkin ideas turn out to be the best ones. So we call it Project Fat Bat, A, because it's a fun name, but B, because the whole idea, this was really a major shift in our thinking at this time, which was that up until that point, most of the work that we had tried had been about trying to reduce the amount of the fungus that could either be in the environment or be on the bats. It was like about trying to reduce exposure of the bats to the fungus in some way. And there's still ongoing work that's trying different approaches, and that's really valuable. I mean, one thing that we've learned in this fight to save bats from white nose syndrome is that it is it's all about being creative and having as many tools in our toolbox, and that each different strategy can kind of help bats in a different way. And it's not going to just be one solution solves the whole problem. So, but where our thinking shifted was that Dr. Tina Chang, who'd been my graduate student, had done this neat work, and Greg Turner at Pennsylvania Game Commission had also shown some data that bats who are entering hibernation with more fat, higher body condition had a better probability of surviving the winter. And so we wanted to turn that into an intervention, turn that into a way in which we could help bats get fat before winter, so that they could, even if the fungus was still in their caves or mines where they were hibernating, that they could survive it. And so as a proof of concept, we did an initial pilot with funding from EPRI up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. The idea is pretty simple too. We string up UV lights, so that these are lights that don't contribute to artificial late at night pollution because they're in the UV spectrum. They're targeted to attract different kinds of nocturnal insects that the bats can then forage on really close to their hibernacula, which is the places where they spend the winter. And so bats already go through this phase right before hibernation where they're just trying to eat as much as possible. I sort of think about it sort of like us during the holidays, they're just like, all the good, delicious calories. And then, but for them, they don't want to diet in January, although hibernation, I guess, is sort of the equivalent of what most of us experience post-holiday season.
It's sort of like the bears that the national parks are always talking about, the fat bears. I think they just announced the winner this month.
Yeah, same exact idea. So, we were just, sort of leaning into what the bats are already naturally doing, but could we just make some improvements to make it just a little bit easier for them? So I like to think of our UV lights as being, the all-you-can-eat bug buffet for the bats. And so what we found was that certain species like little brown bats really do take advantage of the bug buffet. They increase their foraging activity around the lights, both in the fall, right before hibernation, but then we also extended it to being in the spring when the survivors are coming out. And females have this incredible task that they have to do. They've just survived this long winter without any food. And if they're living in a place with the fungus that causes white nose, they've also had to withstand the physiological impacts of having that fungus on them. And then they've got to be able to move to where they want to raise their pups initiate gestation and pregnancy and be ready and be in the best body condition possible to raise their young, because bats only have one pup per year. And they have just the active season to get that reproduction done. And so bats have this cool thing where a lot of them mate in the fall, actually, and then the female store sperm and then wait for the conditions to be just right to be able to initiate that pregnancy. So both in the fall, leading into the fall, you want to be as fat as possible going into hibernation, but then coming out of hibernation, you want to be able to recover your body condition, heal any wing damage that you might have had during the winter, and get ready to have your baby. And that's the way in which we can help the populations that have already declined from white nose be able to not decline further, but also start to grow and recover. So we did the first pilot in Michigan and then had really good success. And so then we expanded the idea of saying, okay, that's not the only place this is working. And for me, this was one of the great aspects of getting to work with EPRI, was that we had the possibility. So often in science, you get to do one study and then you're like, okay, we did that study. Hopefully somebody will use it and pick it up and do something with it. But with EPRI, we were able to say, okay, we have these initial results. Now let's expand it and test it in lots of other places in partnership with industry and see how well this works across the range of some of these species and with other species. And those results are also really promising. And we're about to publish those.
So how many sites have we tested now?
Yeah, so we've tested now at 25 sites.
I thought you were going to say like 4. 25 is great.
No. And again, that's kind of what Fred was alluding to, is that, again, oftentimes in science, you don't have an opportunity to really sort of try something at scale. And so, after that first sort of pilot study, Fred and I were brainstorming. I was like, well, what's the next thing? She goes, well, we really need to try to replicate this, over a larger scale. And I was like, all right, well, let's figure out how to do it. And so, so we, EPRI, we launched a supplemental project that, Ameren, AEP, Duke, First Energy, and NIPA all funded. And so BCI and EPRI work closely with those funders to try to identify these hibernacula in the service territory of each one of these companies, and to work with local and sort of state partners to go out and sort of do this study. And so we worked very, very hard to go out and put a bunch of bat detectors, again, from Texas all the way to New York over 2 years, and collect sort of that data and analyze it. And we learned a lot, including that in New Jersey, for example, black bears like to come to those lights and knock it down, which is, a little bit of a challenge. But we were able to sort of get some really, really good results and a lot of sort of data, that we're really excited to sort of get out, moving forward.
Well, this is such a neat project, and I'm glad that we had this opportunity to talk about it, especially because it's Bat Week, which, of course, is everybody's favorite week. And this year it ends in Halloween, so I don't know. Maybe there's a lot of bat Halloween costumes out there this year. But we've come to the end of our time. But I want to give each of you an opportunity to leave our listeners with any final thoughts. Anything you weren't able to mention or something else that they should know. And also check out the episode description, everyone. We're going to drop some links in there to more information about fat bats. So with that, Christian, any final thoughts for our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, this, I think, is a great example of a really sort of innovative project where you identified an issue and tried to go out and sort of solve it. And again, it's also the solution we're working on, will have hopefully conservation and recovery benefits. But, the other potential sort of benefit for industry is, this potentially could be some sort of mitigation option as we sort of continue to, collect more research and engage with, Fish and Wildlife Service and other stakeholders. I mean, so we believe that this could be, an ongoing solution to help the bats and also to help industry as we continue to try to build out and maintain sort of the energy infrastructure. And then, lastly, I think that there's and again, maybe Fred, you can talk about this, is, I think that this kind of approach in terms of, trying to take, again, this adaptive management approach, try to address these solutions at scale. I think of the way that we need to be thinking about from the energy sector and how we work with folks like BCI and Fish and Wildlife Service to try to find these solutions.
Great. Fred, any final thoughts for you?
Yeah, just how much we've really enjoyed working with Christian and with EPRI on being able to develop these solutions, and also that the Project VATBAT is covered in a feature-length documentary film that's being released this month and is showing in various theaters. You can check it out. It's called The Invisible Mammal, and see if there's any sort of local showings near you. They followed us in the field up in the UP in Michigan and talk a lot about the project and sort of a kind of behind the scenes look at the work that we did up there. So might be fun to check out.
Very cool. All right. Well, Winifred, Christian, thanks so much for joining me today on the EPRI Current. And to our listeners, make sure you listen next time. And for now, we'll talk to you next episode. If you liked today's show, we invite you to subscribe to our podcast and feel free to share with your colleagues and friends. For more information about EPRI, please visit our website at www.epri.com. And don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn and X at EPRI News. Together, we're shaping the future of energy.